Samsung just released a phone that's thinner than your patience when the Wi-Fi goes down. The Galaxy S25 Edge promises to be the slimmest flagship around. But here's the million-dollar question, or should I say $1,000 question since it costs $1,100. Is making a phone razor thin worth sacrificing the features that actually matter? At just 5.8 millimeters thick, the S25 Edge is definitely slim. To put that in perspective, the regular S25 Ultra is 8.2 millimeters. Now that might not sound like much of a difference when we're talking about millimeters, but Samsung's betting that those extra couple millimeters will convince you to drop serious cash on this thing. But let me tell you what really happened when I got my hands on this phone. First thing I did was dig out some old devices from my drawer. Remember the OnePlus 5 from 2017? That phone feels just as thin thanks to its curved edges. And get this, the original Moto Z from way back is actually thinner than the S25 Edge by a hair. Sure, those phones don't have the latest Snapdragon chip or fancy cameras, but it puts things in perspective. The real story starts when you flip this phone over. Where the S25 Ultra has 4 cameras that can practically see into the future, the Edge gives you just 2. No telephoto lens, no advanced zoom capabilities, and definitely no S Pen. It's like buying a sports car and finding out they removed 2 cylinders to save weight. Now the screen is actually pretty solid. Samsung gave it a 6.7-inch LTPO AMOLED display with all the bells and whistles. 120 Hz refresh rate, super sharp resolution, gets nice and bright. But even here there's a catch. I noticed this weird color shift when viewing it from an angle. Look at it straight on and the colors are warm and pleasant. Tilt it just 10 or 20 degrees, and suddenly everything gets cooler. Not deal-breaking for watching videos, but it's one of those things that reminds you this isn't quite Samsung's A-game. Speaking of not quite A-game, let's talk performance. On paper, this thing should scream. It's got the same Snapdragon 8 Elite chip as every other flagship Android phone this year. In quick benchmark tests, it keeps up with the best of them. But here's where that slim design bites back hard. Remember how I said they made this phone thin? Well, they had to remove the cooling system to do it. No vapor chamber, no fancy heat dissipation. So what happens when you push this phone? It gets hot, really hot. And then it slows down to protect itself. I ran some stress tests, and after just one benchmark run, performance dropped by 16%. By the end of 20 runs, it was running at half speed. The temperature jumped from 84 degrees to over 105 degrees Fahrenheit after a single intensive test. You know where all that heat goes? Right to the camera bump area. At least it doesn't make the whole phone uncomfortable to hold, but if you're planning to game on this thing or do anything intensive, you're in for disappointment. The everyday experience is fine though. With 12 gigs of RAM, apps stay in memory, everything feels snappy when you're just scrolling through social media or texting. But knowing that power is being held back by poor thermals is frustrating when you're paying flagship prices. Battery life tells a similar story of compromise. They squeezed in a 3900 mAh battery, which sounds decent until you remember this has a huge 6.7-inch screen to power. It'll get you through a day, sure, but while phones like the OnePlus 13 are pushing 2-day battery life, the S25 Edge feels like it's barely keeping up. Now, let's get to those cameras, because this is where things get really interesting. Samsung borrowed the 200-megapixel main sensor from the S25 Ultra, which sounds impressive. And honestly, in good light, it takes excellent photos. Colors pop, maybe a bit too much if you prefer natural tones, and details are sharp. But zoom in past 2x and things fall apart fast. Without a dedicated telephoto lens, you're relying on digital zoom, and by 4x, photos look like an oil painting. You get these weird halos around objects, soft details, just not great. The ultra-wide camera is even more basic. Lower resolution than the Ultra's version, struggles in low light, and when the phone switches to macro mode using that ultra-wide, forget about getting crispy close-up shots. The selfie camera does its job. Nothing spectacular, but it'll make you look good enough for your Instagram stories. Here's what gets me about this phone. Samsung had this entire S25 lineup that covers every base. Want the ultimate everything device? S25 Ultra. Want something more manageable? Regular S25 or S25 Plus? But then they made this Edge model that doesn't really excel at anything except being thin. And that thinness, it's not even that impressive when you remember the camera bump basically doubles the thickness at that corner. Plus, there's this weird recessed area around the cameras that's definitely going to collect pocket lint and who knows what else. Some early reports suggest those camera modules might pop off easier than they should, which is concerning for a phone this expensive. Samsung is asking $1,100 for the base model with 256 gigs of storage. Want 512 gigs? That'll be $1,219. For context, you could get a regular S25 and have money left over for a nice pair of earbuds, or spend a bit more and get the Ultra with all its features intact. The software experience is typical Samsung, Android 15 with One UI on top. You'll get 7 years of updates, which is excellent. Samsung's gotten better about not forcing their account on you during setup, though you'll still find their versions of basic apps like Calendar and Contacts hanging around. So who is this phone actually for? If you absolutely must have the thinnest phone possible and you're willing to sacrifice zoom quality, battery life, performance under load, and various other features, then sure, the S25 Edge delivers on that one promise, but for everyone else, it's hard to recommend. The pursuit of thinness in phones feels like solving a problem nobody really has. My pockets aren't complaining about carrying phones that are 8 millimeters thick. But I definitely notice when my phone throttles during gaming, or when I can't get a decent zoomed photo, or when I'm scrambling for a charger by evening. Samsung's made plenty of great phones. The S25 Edge just isn't one of them. It's not terrible, the display is nice, everyday performance is smooth, and that main camera can take some stunning shots. But at this price point, not terrible doesn't cut it. You're paying Ultra money for distinctly non-Ultra features. The Edge feels like Samsung's engineering team showing off rather than solving real problems. Yes, they can make a super thin phone, but should they? Based on all the compromises here, I'd say probably not. If you're in the market for a new Samsung flagship, do yourself a favor. Either save some money with the regular S25 or spend a bit more and get the Ultra with all its features intact. The S25 Edge proves that sometimes thinner isn't better. It's just thinner. And in the world of smartphones where every feature counts, that's simply not enough. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video.